We're all set.
Adelante, Vero.
Tagunizani tu weni tatsabi weni nya nikitsa weni nukayo ya nyusabi tachui saludo no weni. That was a welcome greeting in my indigenous language, Sabi or Mixtec. Good morning, afternoon, or evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Verónica Aguilar Martinez from the New Sabi people, or people of the rain, speaking from our ancestral lands in Mexico. As part of the cultural survival staff, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the panelists and the audience to this webinar entitled Regaining Balance at the Intersection of Indigenous Language and Climate Change. Before starting, there are some important things I should let you know. First, interpretation is available in English and Spanish. To access the interpretation, click on the word icon in the bottom navigation bar to choose your language. Hay interpretación disponible en inglés y español. Para acceder a la interpretación, haga clic en el icono del mundo en la barra de navegación inferior para elegir su idioma. This event is being streamed live on Cultural Survival's Facebook page and YouTube page. It's being recorded and will be posted later on www.cs.org and our YouTube page, so you can watch it again or share it for those who were unable to attend live. You can learn more about cultural survival by visiting www.cs.org. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Cultural Survival and Blue Sky at CSORG. If you would like to support the work of Cultural Survival, you can make a donation at cs.org/donate, so we can continue to do this work. Questions and answers will take place at the end of the presentations, if time permits. Please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. This webinar is organized by Cultural Survival. For those of you who are with us for the first time, I would like to tell you that we are an Indigenous-led nonprofit organization based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have been working to protect the rights of Indigenous peoples and support their self-determinations, cultures, and political resilience since 1972. Cultural Survival envisions a future that respects and honors the inherent rights and dynamic cultures of Indigenous peoples, deeply and richly interwoven in lands, languages, spiritual traditions, and artistic expressions, rooted in self-determination and self-governance. We do this through a four-pronged approach: grant-making, advocacy, capacity building, and communications. I want to thank our guests who generously agreed to share their stories with us. They wrote about their experiences of intersectionality in Indigenous language and climate change for the latest issue of Cultural Survival Quarterly. If you have not yet had a chance to read their stories, I invite you to do so. In the words of our director, Amy Robertson, Indigenous languages are fundamental indicators of the state of Mother Earth's biological and cultural diversity. United Nations reports indicate that ecosystems managed by Indigenous peoples retain the highest measures of biodiversity, while biodiversity hotspots also maintain high linguistic diversity. However, many Indigenous languages are in danger of extinction, reflecting the decline of biodiversity and showing how they are intertwined. The United Nations estimates that by the year 2100, more than half of the world's languages, most of them indigenous, will no longer be heard. Climate change is one of the drivers of the loss of indigenous language, putting traditional ecological knowledge at risk. This has a major impact on cultural landscapes, livelihoods patterns, food sovereignty, and the well-being of indigenous peoples and all life around the world. Embedded in our language is the knowledge that we must accept our critical stewardship responsibilities and seek to balance and rebalance our relationships with the world and the beings around us. We have dedicated our last issue of CSQ to indigenous leaders who are on the front lines of climate change, working on various fronts to safeguard the language, cultures, and environments. To discuss this topic, we will begin our conversation today with our panelists, Kseniia Bolshakova from the Dolgan indigenous people, Nai from the Maasai indigenous people, and Djalma from the Aranã Caboclo indigenous people. Well, to start, we are going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and briefly tell us about your work related to language. So can we start with Kseniia, please?
Hi everyone, my name is Kseniia Bolshakova. I'm a Dolgan. The Dolgans are an indigenous people of the Russian Arctic. There are only 8,000 Dolgans and just 10% of us speak Dolgan. Dolgan is the northernmost Turkic language in the world. Our language is closely tied to reindeer herding. I belong to the youngest and possibly last generation of Dolgan speakers. My people live in the permafrost zone. Winter there lasts for 9 months of the year. We are reindeer herders, hunters, fishers, and mammoth tusk seekers. Nowadays, we are losing our traditional lifestyle. More and more Dolgans are abandoning nomadic life with reindeer in the tundra and transitioning to a sedentary way of life. I'm likely one of the last Dolgans to be raised in tundra with our reindeer herd. I'm an indigenous decolonial writer, and I write in my native Dolgan language. In 2024, I presented my novel All the Frost Melts at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues in New York. Through my writing, I address the challenges faced by my people to bring these issues to the attention of the Dolgan community, other indigenous people, and Russian authorities. Right now, I am working on my next novel about boarding schools for indigenous children. They still exist in Russia, and I grew up in one myself. I am passionate about supporting other indigenous language communities. Currently, I work as a content manager of a mobile application for learning the Saha language. Additionally, I am an editor of the electronic dictionary of the Chukchi language. Moreover, I contribute to documentation of the Kumande language.
Thank you, Kseniia, and congratulations on that great work. Can we continue now with Nai, please?
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name's Nailejileji Tipap. I'm from Tanzania. I'm from the Maasai community. I've been working with the indigenous community, specifically the Maasai, the Barbai, the Hadzabe, and the Akie community in Tanzania, on different issues, including the issues of women rights, land rights, but also the issues of climate change. Being from the Maasai community, first of all, in the Maasai, we have about 33 subsections in it, and we all speak the native language, the Maasai, despite of the location, because we find our tribe basically within Tanzania and the other part of Kenya. So that does not distinguish our background, our practices, together with our language. Currently, I've been working on issues of community-based research, specifically trying to come up with understanding of the indigenous knowledge on the upholding of the issues of climate change, but the knowledge being held by women, especially to understand how they are highly engaged also and their knowledge being put out. Coming from the community that within the whole domain, we are still the marginalized, but women inside it as another marginalized group. So voicing out and amplifying the voices of indigenous women and youth, I've been working not only on the issue of the indigenous knowledge, but also on the issues of climate change awareness and the adaptation and how it is applied to the land management system through different platforms, like at the national level, but also in beyond the national level. And in that form, we have come out working also with an organization, Northern Indigenous Women Development Affairs, that highly bring young women in the media to document and put out the indigenous knowledge that others see as an outdated knowledge from other backgrounds, and remove the increase of other communities to sideline the indigenous livelihood system. So as Indigenous Women Development Affairs, we have documented all this. And thank you so much. I hope to be with you all through.
Thank you, Nai. Certainly, it's a very important work with women. Can we go with you, Djalma, please?
Hi, everyone. I will try to open my camera. My internet has working poorly these days. Sorry. I'm very glad to be here today. My name is Djalma Ramalho. I am from the Aranã Caboclo community, indigenous people from the Jequitinhonha Valley, who are very engaged in a legal struggle right now against the Brazilian state, trying to protect our traditional territory. I am a grassroots communicator, and I have a degree in linguistics and literature from the Federal University of Minas Gerais. Currently, I am pursuing a master's degree at the same university, UFMG, focusing on indigenous languages and linguistics rights. I have been guiding the process of recovering, or as I like to call, reforestation, revitalization of the Aranã Caboclo language, which is grounded in the knowledge of our elders, combined with official archives. Then we have official data. One document that I used it's very important to that research was a German document. It was never being translate to Portuguese before, was just in Germany in Aranã. So that was my first work, and I still using what the others already know about the language, and we're trying to plant the language to make reforestation of our language with that seeds. Currently, I organize gatherings with communities, especially with my community, where we use traditional practices as literacy tools to teach about a way to see the world, about our way to see the world. We have using what we call biscoito escrevido, which is a cassava biscuit. Then we made like letters and sometimes like drawings. So we write and draw names and shapes and integrate with the food, language, and cultural knowledge into that practice. And that has been my work. I also have been trying to protect the Jequitinhonha Valley from the lithium mining, which is advancing in our territory more and more. And I have been participating of public speech, public hearing, and we are trying to protect and defend our territory, which are so important to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Djalma. Now, I'm going to make some questions to every one of you, separate questions. You have around 4 to 5 minutes to speak, and we would like to have your thoughts on these specific questions designed for you. The first one is for Kseniia. In your article, How Climate Change is Leading to a Language Shift in the Russian Arctic, you mentioned the domino effect of climate change. The reindeer are lost, the nomadic style of your indigenous people, the Dolgans, is lost, and with it, their language. Can you explain more about it?
Thank you, Verónica. Reindeer herding has always been at the heart of our culture. If we look back 100 years, every Dolgan family had a reindeer. But today, only a handful of families still practice reindeer herding. Just 10 years ago, there were dozens of Dolgan herding families. In the past, there were 500,000 domestic reindeer across the vast Taimyr Peninsula. Now, the remaining Dolgan herders own only 2,000 reindeer. So you see, the decreased number of our reindeer and of Dolgan speakers are relatively comparable. This decline is not happening because people simply decide to give up the traditional lifestyle and native language. It's not a choice. It's a consequence of global changes beyond our control. The Arctic climate that shapes our life is changing rapidly. Winter rains appeared beyond the Arctic Circle. When the rain freezes, it traps the white mass under ice. And the white mass is the main food for our reindeer. The animals can no longer reach it, and they starve to death. Even if we try to rebuild our herds, there are many other threats. Wild reindeer can lure away domestic ones. Wolves and bears attack them. Infectional diseases spread among the animals. This is about more than just reindeer. When our way of life disappears, so does our language. Indigenous communities across Siberia have already lost both their herding traditions and their native tongues. The Dolgans are one of the last groups holding onto both. But for how much longer? Some say that language and herding are inseparable, that without it, our language cannot survive. And it is true that herding has always been a space where Dolgans naturally speak Dolgan. But is our language really limited to the tundra? No, it is a fully developed language that can be used in every part of life. So why is the language disappearing along with the reindeer? The answer is simple. Reindeer herding is our own livelihood and our own production. It is the foundation of our independence. When we lose it, we are forced to integrate into a world built by Russians. Even in national settlements, where 99% of the population is Dolgan, the dominant structures and economy are controlled by Russian institutions. This is the root of our problem. It's the big question of our continued existence as an indigenous nation. Until recently, Dolgans tried to shift sustainability from reindeer herding to wild reindeer hunting. But even this is no longer a reliable alternative. 15 years ago, the Taimyr Peninsula was home to nearly 500,000 wild reindeer. By next year, that number is expected to drop to 70,000. At this rate, in 5 years, wild reindeer in our region could be completely gone. Climate change conditions this. As temperatures rise, wild reindeer are migrating to other lands. The Dolgans live in the permafrost zone, a place that has remained unchanged for thousands of years. But the ice that has always been our foundation is melting beneath our feet. Climate change is not just a crisis for our culture or tradition. It is a direct threat to our existence as a people.
Thank you, Kseniia. I think it's very important that you remark the difference of identity between Dolgan and Russian. And that's one of the reasons I think we cannot separate language from our political standing. So the fight for language is a political fight. Thank you. And now I'm going to make a question to Djalma. We know that racist violence and dispossession of territory cause indigenous peoples to lose their language and biodiversity. Tell us about the case of the Aranã Caboclo people and what they are doing to fight this problem. Please, Djalma.
So we, the Aranã Caboclo people, we are a living example of resistance in face of racism, violence, and territorial dispossession, with treating our language, identity, and biodiversity. For over 19 years, we have been engaged in a legal battle against the Brazilian state to reclaim and demarcate the territory, as I said. However, the increasing pressure from agribusiness, lithium mining, and eucalyptus monoculture has only intensified as these threats to our physical and cultural survival. To confront this reality, we have developed resilience strategies, such as a linguistic reforestation, as I already said. It's a way to combat the linguicide and the ethnic shame by revitalizing our language, ensuring that our words, our stories, our dreams, our cosmogonies, our ancestral wisdom are not erased and be preserved. Even though our territory has not been officially demarcated by FUNAI, we continue to protect and regenerate our biodiversity, cultivating, monitoring different varieties of the Aranã Caboclo potato, which is a tuber a species deeply connect with our people's ecological and cultural heritage. We also resist trying to keep and maintain our songs, our narratives, and our traditional festival, making the Biscoito Escrevido, making the Aranã Caboclo jam, to affirm our identity and our strength, our presence. The destruction of our territory, our land, directly affect the transmission of traditional knowledge, preventing us from stopping us from fully practicing our ecological and linguistic knowledge heritage. Our struggle is not just about territory, it is about our right to exist, to speak our language, and to maintain the knowledge passed down through generations. We stand as an example of how Indigenous people continue to resist to colonial oppression, reclaiming our possibility of future while we are honoring our past. We are a people originate from Jequitinhonha Valley, and we have suffered with violence inflicted upon Indigenous people in Brazil. These acts or violence lead to Brazil being cited for the first time in history, I think is 2021 by UNESCO. They send a note talking about the risk of indigenous genocide in Brazil. It is the first time in the history the ONU did something like that to show the world what we are living and fighting against here. The institution also highlights the need for revitalization and preservation of indigenous language. And today we are engaged in this struggle, trying to reclaim our territory, our language, which we cannot separate the language from the territory. Everything is connected to us. About the Aranã Caboclo language, the decline of the Aranã language as a first language is a direct result of the systematic erasure of our language and culture, colonial politics, cultural prejudice, and imposition of dominant language have led to the marginalization of our language, of the Aranã. They also, we have destruction of important libraries here in Brazil, and important records relate to this language. We have a big fire in an important museum here, and we have a big loss in this. And that destruction just, it's another layer of that genocide that we are facing here. We have a big history of conflicts and massacres against our people, disrupted by the intergenerational transmission of the language. Our struggle to preserve our territory and culture, it's fundamental to preserve our identity. And the expansion of the timber industry, the eucalyptus monoculture are creating a big green deserts devoid of biodiversity, and have drastically transformed the Jequitinhonha Valley, negatively impacted our people, environment, culture, mining the region, particularly from lithium threads, the integrity of the Aranã Caboclo territory, and disrupts the social and ecological balance. So these factors, along with historical strategy of massacres, biological warfare, it's just a pattern of just genocide that I'm trying to express and show. In response to this scenario, we, Aranã Caboclo people, along other indigenous groups such as Pancararu, Pataxó, and Machacali, We have intensified our fight on multiple fronts. In addition to territorial resistance, we have been promoting initiatives to strengthen our language and culture and ensuring that future generations have access to the knowledge of our ancestors. And I think is that. Thank you.
Thank you, Djalma. I think your people is very brave for continuing this fight, even in this difficult context. Thank you for sharing this with us. And now I have a question for Nai. Nai, please, how does the Maasai language encapsulate traditional ecological knowledge? And in what ways can this linguistic heritage inform contemporary climate adaptation strategies?
Thank you so much, Verónica, and thank you for my fellow panelists also. First of all, we can distinguish the indigenous Maasai community with the surrounding of the environment. We are mutually related, I can say that. We are mutually related with it because all our livelihood system revolve around the land and revolve around the natural resources that we surround us. So based on the question, first of all, I'll start by explaining on the oral traditional knowledge on how this is mainstream to the generations and how we are grown under the oral traditional knowledge within ourselves. As a Maasai community, we have a number of practices, and these practices are bound to how our traditional and our language is mainstream and is upheld to the surrounding that is around us, from the environmental system, from the biodiversity, and also from the land system that we have. In the gathering that I said that we have different practices that mainly focus on the aim of learning, mainly focus on the aim of us to understand the livelihood system that surround us, but pertaining also the issues like the climate change, the adaptation to difficult times that may come upon us. And all these are surrounded with issues like songs that describes and have words that cannot be described outside the domain of the language that we have. For the songs, we have women's songs that actually, during the hard time, spiritually they sing, but it helps. And this attach them directly to the Mother Earth, directly to the environment, and directly to the disasters like the climate change, and how it can be separated from it. That is beyond even our own understanding on that. But also we have the child-parent care. You are born within a community that speaks the same language, groomed under every situation. And that's why there are things that are named in a community. And even if you move to another area, if another name is named after that, it remains to resemble what really is the meaning from the name that it was. That's why areas that are dominantly residents of the indigenous people, especially the Maasai, even the name reflects the real what's the meaning of that area. That's why if you go to lowland areas or we go to the dry areas, still we have descriptive ways of describing the whole situation. And that descriptive of describing the whole situation is described by our own words that we have as a community, but described also by the practices that we have within a community. So you can distinguish the issues within us out of our own language. And that's why we say that even the say that we have, like a saying that we have as a community, reflect the mobility we have within us. That's why even in the mobility that we have as pastoralists is all attached within the own language we have. And that's why if you go today to the place like Kenya, where it's another country, and come back to the place like Tanzania, but the same community live, the whole mobility process that we have is named according to that. And not only named according to that, the descriptive of the trees, the descriptive of the naming of the area, the descriptive of the situation, the seasonal that we have, the dry season, which is one of it, and we have the wet season as one of the part of the season, all are revolving around the same language. And that makes it difficult for another person who come in. And that's one of the things that now we are facing at the Maasai community, specifically from my area, Ngorongoro area, where a lot of encroachment into the areas are done in the merely name of the conservation. But the main custodian of this environment are within us, because even the language that we speak is directly attached to it, from the herbs that we use, from the whole conservation that we do, from the water service, water sources, and all that are revolving around the whole situation that we have. So when you come to the issue now of the climate change and the current this thing of our own language, is because of the influx, the misunderstood of the livelihood of the Maasai community, but also the slide or ignored by the laws and the regulative of the state by not recognizing this community like the Maasai. Particularly in my country, the Maasai are not recognized as indigenous communities, but we do recognize ourselves, because all that revolve around us make us to recognize ourselves as indigenous community. So apart from that identity be stolen out because of other misunderstood of why we are not indigenous, it's just because of the issues that arise within and outside our domain, from the colonial eras to the current time that now we live in the neo-colonial era, that a person from another community sees this as these people are living in the forest, these people are destructive of the environment, but the same people use the same scientific research that are not just recognizing the community on that basis of them be custodian of the environment, but their own practices and the livelihood system that give that paternity of the mobility situation we have as the community. And all this revolve from our language, from our identities, from our practices that keeps us to continue uploading to the language that we hold.
Thank you, Nai. And just a quick question about the terms related to land. Is it possible that you give us an example? I think our attendees will appreciate it.
Sorry?
If you could give an example of the terms, the linguistic terms related to land.
Okay. Oh, yeah, sure. For instance, now I will mention them in my vernacular language. That's all the problem. But if it's okay, it's fine. For example, we have areas that we use them, particularly for practices like eat meat camping. And these areas are designated only for that activities. Like now in my language, we call them opul. These areas are where people learn different herbs. The young men learn different herbs and how to use them. And also are areas within the community that these young men learn different tactics and different knowledges on protecting themselves positively as their territorial area. Beyond that, there are areas that where waters are found, Ichoroi. We say that Ichoroi, and they are named after prominent people, particularly for the aim of these areas to be protected, to be used during either dry season or particular areas to be used or during a certain season that we see we have problem of water. But we go further to areas like areas that are dense with grass, areas known as erat. These are areas that they are well furnished in a way that they are used at a certain time. Not all the time that you find people getting into that areas. And that's why even in the mobility, we have areas like we call ronjoi. These are areas designated to be used only during the dry season. So the community will be, during the dry season, they will move with the livestock to these areas and where they will graze their areas and then come back home when now we have the wet season. But apart from that, we have areas that are around our bomas. These are called Lokeren. These are small areas, not large, but they are used by calves, sick livestock during the time the ronjo are taken, the ronjo time is being used, but also can be used during also the wet season. So we have a number of them that you can distinguish, you can actually separate them even during this time of the climate change season.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, I have another question for Kseniia. Considering the current trends, what is the outlook for the Dolgan language and culture? And what steps are essential to ensure their safeguarding for future generations? Kseniia?
Yeah. Russia refuses to acknowledge the colonization of indigenous peoples of Siberia. Our rights and freedoms are constantly violated. This denial of our history makes it incredibly difficult for us to advocate for our land, culture, and identity. Last August, Russia withdrew from the European Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. This withdrawal left us completely defenseless in the face of discrimination and oppression. Last November, the Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, targeted 172 organizations and media advocating for indigenous rights. The Russian government declared them as terrorist organizations. In addition, the Russian Ministry of Justice took similar steps, declaring 55 indigenous organizations as part of an anti-Russian separatist movement. Our government literally labels all indigenous activists as extremists and terrorists. Those of us who continue to fight for our rights face constant danger. Activists are arrested, put in prison, and called traitors simply for defending their people. To have a chance for the future, we need a complete change in governance of the country. We need dismissal for all charges. We need completely other legislation. We need real funding and support programs. The dictatorship that persecutes us will never give us these opportunities. We are sentenced to life imprisonment in the prison of nations until we die out. We are fighting a battle on two fronts, one against political oppression and the other against the environmental crisis. To make meaningful progress, we need support from the international community. We need the world to see what is happening in Siberia to stand in solidarity with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kseniia. Sometimes in countries where the oppression is masked, we forget that it is important to fight for our political rights. And it's important that you remind us of that. Thank you. Djalma, now I have a question for you. There are examples of how indigenous peoples maintain practices to know and conserve natures. For example, the Tigma Mashakali people and their relationship with bees. Can you expand on this experience?
Yeah, I can. I actually love that's was maybe was the part of the article that I'm like more to research and write. It's very beautiful. In the article, I explore the deep interconnection between indigenous linguistic diversity and environmental conservation diversity, in phasing how ancestral knowledge transmitted through indigenous languages is crucial. It's crucial for biodiversity preservation and climate adaptation strategies. The relation between linguistics and ecological diversity, it is exemplified in the article in regions like New Guinea and also in the Amazon, which host both extensive number of languages and indigenous people, and also exceptionally rich biodiversity. Indigenous languages are not merely communication tools, but epistemic reservoirs, epistemic territories essential for sustainable land management. And in the article, I also present specific conservation practice such at the Mashakali, the Tikma, which is in Mashakali language, a song. It's called, I don't know how to say the name of this animal. Looks like a otter, but doesn't live in the water and eats honey. Honey gatherers, something like that. But it is what is interesting. It's because in that song, they maintain a deep and ancestral relationship. They show how they maintain a deep ancestral relationship with bees, because in the song, they catalog a name of 33 bee species in Mashakali language, which it's magical because it is not a book, it is not a written document, it is a song, and that song have this knowledge inside. And they just chant this song. It's more than just also a classification system. It functions as a form or learning and preserving the environment and also sustainable managing practices and forestation and harmonious relationship with these essential pollinators, which are the bees. For the Tikma, bees are not merely honey producers, but they are living entities that play a crucial role in maintaining ecological balance. Their knowledge of different bee species, including arapuá, moça branca, mandaguari amarelo, quairapó, that knowledge is passed down through generations in rituals and songs and chants, and also oral narrative. And this wisdom extends beyond the species names. It encompasses details about bee behavior, nesting sites, and best ways to interact with them without harming their survival. In doing so, the Tigma ensure conservation practices that sustain forest pollination and consequently maintain biodiversity within their territory, which is beautiful. It's called Canto do Papamel. The Canto do Papamel serves both ecological and cultural linguistics proposed. When they sung, it mimics the sounds of a swarm, and through overlapping voices, creating an auditory environment that calls upon the bees. They use that expressions, like an invocation of the bees. And this chant and not merely reinforce this symbiotic connection between the Tikmans and nature, but also provides guidance on sustainable practice such as avoiding excessive administration to prevent hive depletion and present the nest of solitary bees. This traditional knowledge, it's vital in a context of climate change and environmental destruction as bees face increased threats due to deforestation and pesticide use. Through their ancestral practices, the Tikmaan contribute to the conservation of bees and biodiversity in their lands and in our lands. And this traditional knowledge, it's vital in a context of colonial destruction, as we used to call them. Like the Tikmaan, other indigenous people use our languages to categorize and interact with environment in unique ways. I also talk a little bit about the Kayapó people. They recognize multiple varieties of piqui, which is a very important plant to us, and also Ingá. When the colonial knowledge only recognized one, and the threat to languages, indigenous languages, is not just linguistic loss, which is important to understand. It's also the collapse of an entire knowledge system refined over centuries and over generations. The extinction of a language means irreversible loss for the whole humanity, the whole world, of information about biodiversity, about sustainable resources managed, and also traditional medicine, traditional practices. The Tikmaan people are clear example of how indigenous people, indigenous communities act as biome protectors, are keepers of the earth, and using our own language as tool for environmental preservation and for knowledge transmissions. And this example, o canto do Papamel, stand as living testament to how indigenous orality functions as both ecological inventory, ecological knowledge, and also a strategy of cultural resistance against territorial destructions. When we protect these practices and languages, we are protecting the indigenous people, we are protecting the forest, we are protecting the biomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Djalma. Thank you for that beautiful examples. We hope we can find some, at least on your article or on YouTube. Thank you. Now we go to another question for Nai. What specific Maasai cultural practices have historically contributed to environmental stewardship? And how are these practices being maintained or adapted in the face of climate change?
Thank you so much. I would like to talk more about the land management system that we have, and this is one of the key things that has continued maintaining all our surrounding as the Maasai community, and which is, in other words, currently we see as it's taking us to an edge of war, an edge of the ending the livelihood system of the Maasai, and also taking us to an end of continuing pressing these best practices that we have. But this is not going to end because it's something that is in our blood, and this is the mutual relation that we have had for time. The land management system, as we know, the Maasai communities are found along the arid and semi-arid areas. And our main season of the years, we have two main seasons of the year, which is the dry season and the wet season. And this has categorized our land into the two seasons, whereby the land management system that we have areas that we use during the dry season for grazing, because dominantly we are pastoralists. So our main backbone of our livelihood is pastoralism. So we have livestock with us. So we have those two seasons, and the division of land now comes in that modality, whereby we have areas that we graze during the hard times, which is during the drought. We have divided this land in the grazing pattern and the mobility that we have. Where lastly, I mentioned about the ronjo. These are the areas that we use during the dry season, and they are designated. If you now go to the Maasai land, you will find a bare land, because we use land communally, a bare land, and you think that this land has no one and no one is living. But that land is reserved to be used at that particular time, where we use it communally. But we have areas that we use during the wet season, like the Nailejileji. These are areas that are there, designated to be used at that time. But also we have areas that we use for our own worships, for our own practices. We have a number of practices that we have. The famous name known as the Manyata. These are areas that are designated where different activities undergo. We have activities like the age system, which this is the place where a lot of blessing, a lot of our identity as the Maasai community undergo within it. I know many people know Manyata as the bomas that we live on, but these are areas that are designated for those practices. But we have other practices like the sacred activity like Enkepara or Layuk. This is a time that is a new age set, is be blessed to become into another age set as the young boys now to be allowed to be circumcised. So we have areas where these are areas where they stay for 3 years because we are preparing for warriorship. So this is the area where these young men stay there. And then being taught different activity within the community, then being named. We have areas that leaders or elders in our community, as like when have areas that things like namings for the age set are only found in those areas, or are only going to be determined in those areas, like a place known as Ndonyo Moruak. This is a place where elders sit there and different traditional activities are being conducted. And these areas, English sometimes is another hard language. So this is also another areas that there are different activity being done and other ritual issues are being conducted there. So that land management system does not leave anyone behind. It is within our practices. It is within our livelihood system as the backbone of our economy or a backbone of our life. Is all within that. So when it comes to the issues now of climate change, how does this land management system enhance or help us in this time of the climate change system? The land management system that we have, basically on the mobility, the structure that we have, and how our livelihood system is bound on those that the mobility that we have. During the dry season, we use this. During that dry season, we have areas that water are found. So all those activities are revolving around. The salt lick are found. But the problems now comes. If these areas are found as bare land, or areas are found that are like open land, because we use it communally, now the issue of conservation come in. Because traditionally, we are conserving not to destruct that land, but to rejuvenate those land to be used at a certain time and go back to another place for that site. But this has been another problem now we are facing at this current time, because we had traditional fire system, whereby the fire system were done to clear the invasive species, to clear the diseases that may come in, and all those for the refreshment of the grass to grow. But because of the new system of the government, the new issues, now that is not allowed. And that's why currently the pastoralist community are facing the invasive species. That is another problem that we have now. But we had our traditional way of killing those invasive species. The other thing now we are facing a number of issues of new model of conservation, like the wildlife management areas. While we as the Maasai, during the two season, we interchange with the wild animals. During that time that I don't use that piece of land, their animals are doing the breeding in those areas with a good mutual relation, because we believe as the Maasai, thus culturally, even the wild animals belongs to our clan. My clan as the Lyser clan. The lion is part of my clan. The other animals part of another clan. So killing a lion today, I'll be a brother or a sister. That's why the mutual relation that we have continues. And that's why today you go to Ngorongoro, you can distinguish the Maasai living there with the wild animal in a good way, with no any separation, but they have that mutual relation of having to utilize the resources equally without conflict. So when the issue of climate change now come in, now we get a lot of new, I don't know how to put it, but new version of conservation. You find there is this, we are saying we are doing biodiversity, we are here for invasive species, we are here for all those, and remove that traditional way that we had to adapt to situation. Because despite only the land use management, we also prepare ourselves on how to tackle the prolonged drought. We have preservations of food for that time. We have even preservation of some water areas. That's why previously I mentioned there are people who are prominent in the community given opportunity to take care of boreholes that are going to only to be used at that time. All these are ways that the land management system of the stewardship works in the community for the aim of tackling different difficult times, but currently now, this has become a problematic to many of the Maasai communities. From the Ngorongoro district, Longido, Simanjiro, we are all struggling on this because the conservation is being polluted, that we are conserving the environment, these people are killing. It's just because of not understanding the mobility and the livelihood system and how it is attached to the environment and the situation that we tackle during the climate change and others catastrophes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nai. Yes, thank you for pointing out that there is racism and colonialism in the approaches to the way we conserve nature. They do not want to accept and understand that indigenous people have their own solutions and relationships with the nature. Thank you. Now, we are going to have a small space for more questions, but for these ones, we only have 3 minutes. This is the same question for all of you. So any of you can reply. How can other indigenous and non-indigenous allies, such as NGOs and researchers, support indigenous communities in their efforts to preserve language and traditional ecological knowledge? Who wants to answer first?
Okay, can I go first?
Go ahead. Thank you.
First of all, we have one of the things is to recognize ourselves as indigenous communities, despite the rules or the regulative, but also to dishonor the colonial boundaries that may be separating us. As my friends were trying to explain different things, I could see the relation we have as indigenous community. So based on that, we need to come up with our own visions, our own vision that show the world exactly what do indigenous community uphold to. This includes the conservation vision, but also how to continue mainstreaming the indigenous language to the generation that comes. despite the influx of people into our areas and also the mobility of the youth to the cities. That is something that we need to advocate as activists, as people from the communities, as also the other indigenous community through our networking, to keep on impressing what is ours, despite how others feel. It's high time also to have our own books written in our language. The ABCD that is written on our language, from the time the child is born, he or her keep understanding the language that is a backbone. And it's high time for us to impress what is ours as indigenous community, because what we read today is someone else indigenous. But if we impress what we have, it's our own indigenous. And this archive will live forever. So I think so it's high time to join together, keep impressing what belongs to us.
Wow, thank you. Does someone else want to answer these questions? How can other indigenous and non-indigenous allies support indigenous communities in their efforts?
Can I go next?
Please.
Our international allies, such as NGOs, researchers, and non-indigenous supporters, can make a huge difference by helping us. Solidarity and advocacy matter, especially when local governments ignore us or, even worse, try to shut us down. Sandaska is a Dolgan village on the Arctic coast. Its inhabitants have relied on fresh water from tundra lakes. But because of global warming, those lakes are now infected with parasites. Methane gases released by melting permafrost also make the water undrinkable. To recover the access to fresh water, the community requires a desalination unit, and the authorities reject all requests from its funding. In fact, before the colonizers introduced the settlement policy, we led a nomadic lifestyle. And we had no problem with fresh water because we were not tied to a village but built on the coast. This is just one example of the bigger issue. Indigenous communities in Russia are being left to deal with climate change and infrastructure failures on their own. We are doing everything we can to adapt, but without resources or political support, we are stuck. International help isn't just about money. It's also about giving us the guidance we need to navigate the challenges we are up against. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Now, Djalma, do you want to add something related to this same question?
Yes, I think it's a very important question, and for allies, both indigenous and non-indigenous, to support indigenous community in preserving our language, our culture. I think it's very, very important. First of all, the recognition of indigenous knowledge and indigenous leadership. I think any action, any initiative must originate from the needs and the interest of the indigenous communities. Avoid external imposition, especially when we talk about resources. We are tired of being treated as objects, not as a human. We're not just database. And I think an important point is recognize that in respect that I think also maybe funding and supporting indigenous-led projects, indigenous-led language revitalization initiatives, and also trying to make to make the world understand every fight for territory, because sometimes it is very hard to make other people understand how much we struggle in that question in territories issues. And it would be very important to have more international voice about that, respecting, of course, our needs and our interests. In my research, I also think it's very important trying to make more documentation and more educational material, dictionaries, booklets, I think different kind of material, educational material for the societies as a whole, to understand more and to know more about us, and also to have more memory. I think it's also a form to keep the memory. When we have a library burning, as we have in the past here, it's such a big loss. It's so important. It's not the only way. We also can have the audiovisual and audio records to capture narratives, chants, prayers, and I think try to hold and keep this knowledge. It's very important. And in this kind of research, which also can be collaborative research, because we also have scientists in these territories. And I think it's also important to think about advocacy and political engagement, how these allies can support initiatives that push for laws recognizing and protection indigenous language, and also coalition of communities and coalition of organizations maybe can be a great idea to work together.
Thank you very much, Djalma. Now, we are going to have a small space for questions from the audience. I have one here. This is for anyone who would like to answer. There is no clear definition of indigenous in the Indian constitution. I hope I would like to know which country is this person talking about. Although the country has ratified some international treaties, so how can indigenous language develop in countries under similar situations? And this person is talking about India. There is no clear definition of indigenous in the Indian constitution. And how can indigenous languages develop in countries under similar situation? Kseniia, Djalma.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, of course.
It is interesting to observe, we're talking about language here. It's interesting to observe how the term Indian has been used in Brazil, carrying a historical misconception dating back to the arrival of the Portuguese, the pirates. When they landed on these lands, they mistakenly believed they had reached India, and therefore began calling the original people as like Indians. The very etymology of the word Indio, refers to the native from the Indus rivers, which is a geographical reference that has nothing to do with the peoples here. However, more than just a navigational mistake, this name has functioned as a tool to erase our diversity by reduction hundreds of distinct people to a single generic term. The rich cultural, linguistic, and territorial diversity that has always existed here was made invisible. So they call us Indians to avoid calling us Tikma, Pataxó, Pancararu, Aranã Caboclo, Krenak, Yanomami. And this semantic eraser, it is a direct reflection of colonialism, which seeks to try to homogenize in the order to dominate, erasing our identities and reducing the plurality of indigenous people to a single stereotyped category. And for this reason, we are reclaiming the original names of each people in each act of resistance. It's about reaffirming the existence and continuity of indigenous culture, challenging the colonial narratives that tries to fit us into a generic label. And also about what's happened in India, I think the lack of a clear definition of indigenous in Indian constitutions reflects a common challenge in many countries where indigenous people have been historically marginalized. This situation creates obstacles for development and preservation of indigenous culture, territory, language. As official recognition, it's often a prerequisite for effective public policies, which is a very important point here. However, I think indigenous languages can thrive even in context where the state does not formally recognize them. Some strategies can include, I think the first one is the self-determination, which it's already has been said here. I think self-determination of indigenous community, it is a political, geographical, economical, cultural, and a social movement, which is very, very, very important. I'm talking in a country we have a war against the state for centuries, so I can understand that we can try to make a reforestation of our language even in that kind of context. I think we can also, in this kind of context, try to think in partnerships with organizations, institutes, and university, international ones, as cultural survival, who can collaboration with educational projects, as they has been collaborating with us here in Brazil, and not just cultural survival is just an example, but we have others allies who can help in this case. And I think the education is always the answer, always the answer. Even to do legal advocacy to try to make this official. I think it's by the education we're gonna get it through that. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. Indigenous is only a political category. Now we have another question. This also is in general for anyone who would like to answer. Do you have a focus on teaching the youth about the relationship between culture and ecosystems? Maybe Nai would like to answer this question.
Yes, I can. I will respond. As I said earlier, through the presentation that we are doing, these are one of the things that will help us continue mainstreaming the knowledge that we get, and also the language that we have continue to mainstream to the new generation. And how does this happen? First of all, currently we are facing countless impacts within the community. As I said, the influx of other communities into our communities, the youth moving to the city. But despite them moving to the city for studies, for work, or for other activities, or the issues of climate change forcing them for more employment, that does not distinct them out of their own culture. So one of the things that we highly impress is the different gathering that we have as a community. And this gathering continue making the youth understand of the conservation they have within domain. And that's why the age systems that we have Maasai is one of the determinants that is continue keeping the conservation that we have today. The activity like Orpul that I mentioned previously, you find the youth when they come back home during the time of vacation, they come, they go to this thing and sharing a lot of information that embed the conservation, that embed the indigenous knowledge that we uphold, but also have them understand more about their own identities as the Maasai or women. The same for the women, and the same apply to the youth, to the men, I mean. And the practices that we have been continue doing it. And one of the things that we keep advocating for the youth, even going to different advocacy meetings or trainings, we advocate for them continuing embracing what they have. And that by keeping on documenting different wise issues that we have within our elders, that I know some of the elders may not be there forever, but having those will help us continue mainstreaming this to the young generation. So I think so it's something that we can keep as network to enhance this in order for the young to continue upholding to this culture, upholding to different knowledges that we have aside science that is within us on conservation. And that's why I mentioned about the vision. If you have our own vision and showcase what we have as a community, and this is the model that has already been keeping our own lands, that today most of it are taken for different parks, game reserves, and all that, to mention a few. This is what has made all this land today to be in others. So having all that will continue building the generation that is upcoming.
Thank you, Naile, for this example. And while we are getting to the end of this presentation, we still have 2 minutes if any of our panelists would like to give a closing remark. Or all of you, of course. Does anyone want to add something?
I just want to thank Cultural Survival for the opportunity to participate of this webinar on Indigenous languages, which is a theme that touches me deeply, visceral and emotional way. Speaking about Indigenous languages is speaking about life, memory, and resistance. It's reaffirming that our words, our languages, our territory, and that each ancestral sound carries centuries of existence and resistance, and that oral tradition remains an essential technology for our people. Being this space of changing and reflection strengths the journey toward a world where linguistic diversity not only survives but flourishes. May we continue to amplify our voices, awaken languages, and honor those who came before us. I am immensely grateful to the organizing team and to everyone who shared the knowledge and affections. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Djalma. Does someone else wants to speak?
Yeah, I also sorry. Yeah, I also want to say thank you for everyone, all speakers and cultural survival to making this Zoom. It's really important to hear all of you, and I think it's really most important things in our indigenous life. It's our Mother Earth and our language and how it's work together today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kseniia. Go ahead, Nai.
First of all, I need to say thank you so much for this opportunity, and to my fellow Indigenous people for all coming, and to the non-Indigenous people who are keeping learning the Indigenous knowledge that we have. The other thing is just to continue saying thank you for Survival and other partners who have been working tireless to continue documenting and sharing different knowledge that is upheld by the Indigenous community, despite the huge wideness of these communities from Asia, Latin to Africa and other places. We say thank you so much to other partners that also have been working closely on that. My last remarks to my fellows and all that, what we hold today is the Tanzanite that no one can be holding it. And maybe we are learning from our elders, and we need also the rest to learn from us. Let's keep documenting, let's keep showcasing what we have for the aim of the new generation to learn. We need a new generation from the Indigenous community that can stand for themselves, basically on their territories, and even showcasing the importance of their knowledge that has continued saving the Mother Earth. Because today, if we go around different places of the Indigenous community, we see how Indigenous communities have continued being custodian of the environment, and their knowledge continue making the Mother Earth being the way it is. And that's why we have different projects that are brought to our areas because of the beauty of the landscapes, the beauty of the forests that surround us. So for this opportunity that we get, let's keep on documenting this, and let's not forget different groups in our communities. Let's have inclusive of all groups in our community, the women, the youth, and also the elderly. Thank you so much for the panelists and others for listening to us.
I thank our panelists for sharing their insights and knowledge with us, and also to the audience. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar on regaining balance at the intersection of Indigenous languages and climate change. If you like what you learn, please consider making a donation at cs.org/donate to support our work, and stay informed about future events through our social media platforms. If you would like to receive our newsletter directly in your inbox and stay informed about our work supporting Indigenous communities around the world, please feel free to subscribe to our newsletter by visiting the link provided in the chat, or leave your email in the chat. Thank you, and see you next time.